Next few slides, actually I have 3, 4 slides. I summarized almost maybe 3, 4 decades of writing on the causal explanation in maybe 10 minutes. That is needed and important for your own research. So pay double attention. I try to make it very simple. At any point you had any questions, please stop me. And they build on each other. When we think about the explanation, the causal relation, we need to think about how these concepts evolved over time and which of them we mean. The simplest way is called deterministic or linear explanation. There is a cause which leads to an outcome. One cause leads to one outcome. And sometimes it's called necessary and sufficient cause. If we have enough resources, then we do implement the strategy. If we have the right skills, then we will have a successful development. If we think about causal relation in terms of there is one cause that determines the outcome, then we are thinking in a linear way from cause to the effect. Of course, that relation can have different forms, positive or negative, linear, non-linear, power relation, any formula. But at the end, there is a relation between X and Y, only X. If we know the value of X, we can say what is the value of the Y. That's the way we think about the causal, deterministic causal relation. Of course, that's not the best thing, because in reality, we move to the second and more advanced picture of the causal relation, which is called multiple perspective. And there, one effect has multiple causes. There are multiple factors impacting the decision of the managers, impacting the adoption of the technology, impacting the evolution of a platform, and so forth. So instead of thinking of one arrow, we need to think about multiple arrows going into one outcome. And there, you can have different, basically, type of relations. If we start from these boxes and arrows, then we have multiple boxes and arrows instead of one relation. Sometimes between the cause and effect, you have a direct relation. You say X partially leads to Y, means one of the factors leading to Y is X. Sometimes you think about your causal explanation in a way that we call it mediator or mediation effect. X does not directly relate to Y, or if it does, it also has an indirect relation. Resources, financial resources, allows organizations to hire skilled employees, which leads to successful development. So there is no direct relation between resources and the successful development. There is an indirect relation. And in this case, hiring the experts is called a mediator. The third type of relation is called moderator. Is slightly linguistically similar to mediator, but it's very different. In terms of moderator, when we think, we say that no, X directly leads to B to Y, but the strength of the relation can be higher or lower depending on another factor, which is in this case the moderator. The higher is the salary of a manager or an employee, the more engaged is that person in his or her work. There is a direct relation between them. But then this effect can be stronger in the States than in the Europe. In both Europe and States, the higher is the salary, the more engaged is the person in the work. But the strength of this effect is stronger in US than in Europe. It's not that higher salary leads you to be in the States and then it leads you to have a more engagement. No, that would be the mediation. Here we are talking about the moderation. Who has any question about the distinction between mediation and moderation? This is very important in your qualitative and quantitative research. Whenever you talk about some explanations, these two can be easily mixed up. Pay very careful attention to these distinctions. And there is something else which is neither the mediation nor the moderation, and that called joint effect. Joint effect means that we need two causes to be at the same time present in order to have their outcome happening. We need a high quality data. We need a good algorithm. Both of them need to be together in order to have a good AI application. Having good data, bad algorithm, we don't have a good AI application. Having good algorithm, bad data, we don't have any good AI application. And it's not that a good data leads to a good algorithm or a good algorithm leads to a good data. No. So they need to both be there in order to have the outcome. Again, any question on the distinction between mediation, moderation, and joint effect? Fully clear? Good. And there is a last one, which is called fake effect, or sometimes called spurious effect. There is a third factor that impacts X and Y, but in reality, there is no relation between X and Y. Wearing the shoes the night before, having headache the morning after. What is this fake effect, this spurious effect behind being drunk, which leads to wearing shoes the night before and leads to being drunk in the day, having headache in the morning after, but there is no actual relation between these two. So it's called fake effect. Many of the rival explanations can be seen in the case of spurious effect. Things that seem to be important behind the scene, but they don't have any impact on anything in terms of the explanation of X and Y. And the last movement of thinking about the causal explanations is the dynamic perspective, that the cause and the effect change over time. So far in the other pictures, we had all sorts of complexities, but we didn't look at the explanation in a kind of dynamic way. time was absent from the previous conceptions of explanation. Here we talk about time, dynamic. It can be that cause and effects have some reciprocal relations, mutual impact, co-evolution, iterative relations. These are the names that you hear in the literature. Or it can be that cause and effect evolve over time. Engines of change has to do with that. So, it's getting a bit more into the unidirectional lecture. There is a distinction between identifying the arrow, between factors, between concepts, between things, and unpacking the arrows. What I call it finding the arrow versus looking inside the arrow. If you come back after your beautiful research and say, I found that if managers train their employees in such a way, the quality of working with this digital technology increases. I say, perfect. Your old things shows that there is an arrow. And you describe that arrow. But I would like you to go back, if especially you are doing qualitative research, not always, also relevant for quantitative, to unpack this arrow, to see what is inside of that. The other word you hear is that the chain of causal mechanisms that are hidden within this arrow. What happens from the moment that the training is implemented to the point that these people work with the technology properly? What actually makes these things happen? As if you say, I give the painkiller, if I just eat the painkiller, the pain goes away. Perfect. There is one arrow between the painkiller and releasing the pain. But if I'm actually a biologist, I ask you to look into the arrow and say, what happens from the moment that you eat the pig? What does that actually, what mechanisms happen? That's the way you need to look at your cases. What happens in the body of your case, in the body of your organizations.